Disclaimer: this story explores mature emotional themes between adults. Viewer discretion is advised. I never intended to wear that dress. It had hung in the back of my closet for years, sleek, midnight blue satin with a thigh-high slit and delicate straps that barely clung to my shoulders. Too bold, too fitted, too much for any occasion I'd ever had. But that night, something changed. We were hosting a small dinner to celebrate my husband's return from a business trip. It was meant to be casual, wine, music, maybe a few friends. But at the last minute, plans shifted. Guests canceled. The food was already prepped, the wine uncorked. My husband, tired from his flight, decided to call it an early night, which left me in the kitchen with Daniel, his son from a previous marriage. My stepson. Daniel was 25. Smart, confident, more grounded than most people his age. We'd always had a polite, distant relationship, cordial, respectful. Nothing inappropriate, nothing remotely close. Until that evening. I didn't notice at first. I'd put on the dress out of boredom, if I'm honest. Something in me wanted to feel seen. Not by anyone in particular. Just alive again. It zipped tight against my skin, and when I stepped into the dining room with 2 glasses of red, I caught his expression before he had a chance to mask it. His eyes locked on me, stunned. For a second, he didn't blink. "You look." He stopped mid-sentence, cleared his throat, and took the glass I handed him. "That's not what you had on earlier." "I changed," I said, suddenly self-conscious. "Too much." He shook his head. "No. Just unexpected." We ate in the glow of soft music and candlelight, the storm outside tapping faintly against the windows. Conversation came easy, too easy. I forgot I was his stepmother for a moment. I forgot he was my husband's son. We talked about art, music, dreams neither of us had admitted aloud before. I laughed at one of his jokes and caught him staring again, his gaze dropping to my shoulder, lingering a second too long before meeting my eyes. The air changed. Something unspoken was circling between us. Not words. Not action. Just awareness. And when I stood to refill the wine, the slit in my dress slipped just enough to expose the curve of my thigh. I felt it, the pause in him. That breath he didn't take. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. But that night, as I stood at the kitchen sink rinsing glasses, I saw his reflection behind me in the window. Watching. Quiet. Still. His expression unreadable, but his eyes said everything. And that's when I realized something had shifted. Not a moment of betrayal. Not even a touch. But something electric had passed between us. A boundary quietly tested. And I didn't know whether to step away from it or lean in. Daniel didn't speak much after dinner. He helped clear the plates, his movements quieter than usual, as though his thoughts had turned inward. I told myself I was imagining it, the shift in him, the way his gaze had lingered too long, the way my skin still tingled from that look. But the silence between us wasn't empty. It was charged. He paused at the kitchen door before heading upstairs, wine glass still in his hand. "You wore that dress for a reason," he said, his voice low. "Didn't you?" I froze. "I wore it because I wanted to feel something," I admitted. "That's all." He nodded, but the look in his eyes said he didn't believe me. Or maybe he believed me too much. Daniel had moved back in 6 months ago after a bad breakup. I'd barely known him before then, only from the occasional holiday or weekend visit. He'd always been polite, reserved. But since moving in, things had changed subtly. We'd had long late-night talks when he couldn't sleep. I found myself leaving the door open when I cooked, hoping he'd drift in with a story or a dry joke. There was a rhythm to it, something soft and easy, but never, ever crossed. Until now. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the half-drunk wine, listening to the storm. My husband had gone to bed hours ago, exhausted from travel. The house felt too quiet, as though it knew something was happening beneath its walls. The next morning, I avoided the kitchen. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to see myself. because part of me was afraid I hadn't imagined it. That the spark in Daniel's eyes was real, and worse, that I'd felt it too. He found me later that afternoon in the sunroom, curled up with a book I wasn't reading. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he should be there. But then he came in and sat across from me. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. I looked up. "Neither did you." We held each other's gaze too long again. It felt dangerous. He shifted. "I've been thinking about applying for a job in Boston. Might be time to go." Something inside me tightened. It was the first time he'd mentioned leaving. That's sudden. Maybe not. His tone was careful, measured. "It's just this house. It's starting to feel like something it shouldn't." The words hung between us like fog, thick, impossible to ignore. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because he was right. Whatever had passed between us, unspoken, unacted, still technically innocent, was becoming something that couldn't stay hidden much longer. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure I wanted it to. 3 days passed. We barely spoke. The morning Daniel mentioned Boston, something shifted in the house, like it had taken a breath and was holding it, waiting to exhale. I avoided him, burying myself in meaningless errands, reorganizing drawers that didn't need it, pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. The air between us now carried a weight that neither of us could ignore. Then came Saturday. My husband, Mark, decided we needed a family dinner, just the 3 of us, like old times. He was in a good mood for the first time in weeks, finally relaxed from work. As he stood over the grill outside, flipping steaks and humming an old jazz tune, I couldn't help but feel the cruel contrast. He was unaware. Completely. And Daniel and I were sitting at the same table, pretending there wasn't an invisible thread stretched tight between us. Mark toasted us with wine. "To a quiet house and the people who make it feel like home." Daniel clinked glasses without looking at me. After dinner, Mark went to the den to catch the game. I began clearing plates when Daniel suddenly stood behind me. Too close. I didn't turn around, but I could feel him. "You look happy tonight," he said softly. I exhaled slowly. "I'm trying to be." I meant with him. "You looked happy with him." There it was again, that question behind his words, the implication he never spoke out loud. Was I happy? Or just surviving? I finally turned to face him. "Daniel, we can't do this." "I know." His voice cracked slightly, "but I can't shut it off. Whatever this is. I didn't ask for it, but it's there." That night, after Mark went to bed, I stayed up in the living room, staring at the flicker of candlelight. My phone buzzed. "Daniel, can we talk?" "Outside." "Just talk." I hesitated, but I went. We sat on the back steps in silence, the cool night pressing around us. For the first time in days, he looked at me without guilt. Just honesty. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he said. "I came here to heal." And I ended up feeling more alive than I ever did with anyone. His voice was steady, but his eyes, those conflicted, stormy eyes, held me there. "I'm not asking for anything," he continued. "I just need to know, before I go. Did you feel it too? Or was I imagining all of it?" I opened my mouth, but the truth burned too close to speak. Because I had felt it. I was still feeling it. But saying it out loud would turn a fragile spark into a wildfire. And from inside the house, through the half-open kitchen window, I heard Mark call my name. I didn't answer him that night, not with words. I just stood there on the back steps beside him, the silence between us louder than anything either of us could have said. And then Mark called from the kitchen. My name, cheerful and unsuspecting. A reminder of everything that should have kept me inside. But I didn't move. Daniel didn't either. "I should go," I finally whispered. He didn't stop me. Just nodded once and stared straight ahead, like if he looked at me again, something would snap. I went inside, face flushed, hands shaking, heart pounding like it belonged to someone else. The next morning, the tension hit a boiling point. Mark had made breakfast, pancakes, bacon, and fresh squeezed orange juice, like it was some kind of Sunday celebration. He was in the best mood I'd seen him in weeks. Meanwhile, I could barely hold my fork. Daniel came down late, hair tousled, hoodie thrown over a plain white tee. He mumbled a good morning and took the seat across from me. I couldn't meet his eyes, but I felt them, every second. Mark poured more coffee and smiled. I was thinking we could take that beach trip next weekend. Just the three of us. It's been too long. My stomach twisted. The idea of being stuck in a car, in a hotel, pretending everything was fine, it was unbearable. Daniel gave a hollow laugh. Actually, I was going to tell you. I got that job offer in Boston. They want me to start next month. The words hit the table like a glass breaking. Mark blinked. Wow, that's fast. I didn't want to say anything until it was real, Daniel said, his voice even, eyes locked on mine. But it is. Mark clapped him on the back, congratulating him, already talking logistics, flights, moving trucks, places to stay. I sat frozen, watching them talk like none of this was unraveling under their feet. When Mark left to take a call, Daniel finally looked at me. And this time, he didn't look away. I'm not staying here another month pretending this doesn't exist, he said, quiet but firm. I need space. And I think you do too. I didn't ask you to leave, I said, barely breathing. He leaned closer. No. But you didn't ask me to stay either. His voice cracked at the end, just slightly. Then he stood and walked away, up the stairs, the weight of everything trailing behind him. I stared at the empty plate in front of me, his fork still resting beside mine. And I knew in that moment, something had to give. Because this wasn't just emotional tension anymore. It was a choice. And soon, someone was going to make it. I thought the worst had passed. Daniel's job offer. His decision to leave. The tension at breakfast. I told myself it was ending one way or another. That we could all move forward, quietly, painfully, but forward. But that was before he found the letter. It was late afternoon when he showed up at the edge of the garden, the envelope in his hand. I was pruning the roses, pretending not to think of him every 5 seconds. I hadn't even noticed the drawer left half open in the hallway. He held the envelope like it was something dangerous. Why didn't you tell me? I froze. What are you talking about? This letter, he said, stepping closer. From my mom, dated 5 years ago. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel, that wasn't meant for you. She wrote you. She warned you. He unfolded the crumpled paper, voice shaking now. She said, he's been through things he doesn't talk about. He gets attached to the wrong people when he's lost. Be kind, but keep your distance. My heart dropped. That letter had lived in my drawer for years, untouched. A guilt I'd buried long before Daniel ever moved back in. I didn't show it to you because it was personal, I said. And because I didn't want to believe it would matter. He looked gutted. You knew. You knew I was vulnerable. That I wasn't just coming here to crash on a couch. I was running from everything. From her. From what she did. And still, you let this happen. I didn't let anything happen, I snapped, finally losing the grip on my calm. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I meant to? You wore that dress, he interrupted, his voice sharper now. And you stood out on that porch with me. And you didn't say no when it mattered. The words cut deep because they were true. But then he added quietly, you were the first person who made me feel seen. And now I don't know if that was real or just a mistake you made when you were lonely. I turned away, fighting back tears. Maybe it's both. He stared at me for a long moment. I'm not going to Boston. I whipped around. What? I turned it down. This morning, before I found the letter. My breath caught. Because I thought, he shook his head. I thought maybe we weren't done. I stared at him, stunned. Everything had shifted again. What was ending was no longer ending. What was broken hadn't shattered yet. But the letter had cracked something wide open. Now, we weren't just fighting a feeling. We were fighting everything that had come before it. We didn't speak for 2 days after the letter. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for the occasional sound of drawers opening and closing as Daniel packed. I didn't ask where he was going. He didn't offer. We moved around each other like strangers until the final morning arrived. Mark had already left for a work trip, convenient timing, or maybe fate giving us space we didn't deserve. I heard the suitcase wheels click against the hardwood as Daniel came down the stairs. I stood in the kitchen, clutching the edge of the counter like it could anchor me to something solid. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood in the doorway, bag slung over his shoulder, eyes unreadable. "I'll have someone come get the rest of my things next week," he said, voice hollow. I nodded, throat tight. "Okay." Silence stretched between us like a final test. And then I broke it. "I loved him," I said, barely above a whisper. "Your father. I married him for the right reasons. But I didn't feel like myself until you showed up." Daniel didn't move. "I didn't plan any of this," I continued. "But I also didn't stop it when I should have. That letter, it wasn't just a warning. It was a mirror. And I didn't want to look." He stepped forward slowly. "So, what are we saying here? That we ruined each other?" I shook my head. "No. I think we woke each other up. But now, we don't get to have the ending we want." He dropped his bag, crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides. For a second, I thought he was going to kiss me. Instead, he took my hand, held it tightly between both of his. "I thought love was supposed to make things easier," he said. "But with you, it only ever made me braver." Tears filled my eyes. And it made me honest. He leaned in close, forehead to mine, breath shaky. "If things were different, I know," I whispered. "Me too." Then he let go. I didn't follow him to the door. I just stood there, hand still warm from where his fingers had been, heart still beating far too fast for something that was already over. The front door clicked shut, and the house was quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt real. Months passed. At first, I thought the quiet would destroy me. The house echoed without Daniel's music drifting from upstairs or his footsteps pacing the hallway late at night. I went about my days like I was watching someone else live them, robotic, rehearsed. Mark eventually noticed something had shifted. He asked if I was okay. I said I was tired. And in a way, I was. Tired of holding it all in. Of pretending nothing happened. One night over dinner, I told him the truth. Not all of it, not the parts that would hurt just to say out loud, but enough. Enough to explain the growing distance. Enough to let go of the lies. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked down at his plate and said, "You've been somewhere else for a while now." I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. We separated quietly. No big blowout. No slammed doors. Just 2 people realizing their chapter was over. I moved out 3 weeks later. I rented a small cottage just outside the city. It was quiet, but not in the same aching way the old house had been. This quiet felt earned. Peaceful. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I'd forgotten how healing it could be, just me, a brush, and a blank canvas with no expectations. And then, one crisp October afternoon, I got a letter. No name on the envelope. No return address. Just a postcard inside of a bookstore in Boston. On the back, in Daniel's handwriting, were 7 words. "I still play that porch song sometimes." That was it. No plea. No promise. Just a reminder that somewhere out there, someone remembered. And maybe that was enough. We never spoke again after that. But I think we both understood we didn't need to. What we shared was real. It came at the wrong time, under impossible circumstances. But it woke us up. Made us see ourselves and each other clearly. That clarity came at a cost. But it also gave us something we hadn't had before, the courage to move forward. And sometimes, that's all love really is. Not the happily ever after, but the push to finally choose yourself. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Let us know in the comments below.